and were exclusively styled by Paul Moore. Ladies and gentlemen, an expansive list of stories for all of us to cover. We will throw some light on what's happening back at home in terms of national domestic politics, how the chess piece is moving in these poll-bound states. We will also throw some light on climate change stories from Bolivia, from South Africa to the French floods as well. Amidst all of this, we will bring you details and developments as to what's happening in terms of the Deep Otsav Guinness Book of World Record that we've put out. There are drills that the Japan island nations are carrying out in terms of tsunami readiness. And at the same time, we're also going to throw some light on day 37 of the Israel-Hamas war. That's our first focus. The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being. There seems to be no end to the fighting, even as various quarters of global leaders have been calling for that 4-hour daily pause. There seems to be no letter. This is what we're picking up from the war front on the 37th day. 11,078 Palestinians and about 1,200 Israelis have been killed in this onslaught. 4,506 is the number of children that have been killed in Gaza. That means one child that has been killed every 10 minutes on average. Meanwhile, 46 Israeli Defense Forces soldiers have been killed in what they call their expansive ground operations across the Palestinian enclave. 240 plus Israelis, civilians and soldiers alike, are being held hostage in Gaza. More than 578 trucks have been let into the Gaza Strip so far. However, that number is minuscule. Meanwhile, Arab and Muslim leaders demand an immediate end to the Gaza war. The Riyadh summit, something to talk about. Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, he's pushed back yet again against international calls for a ceasefire. This, even as Iran has called on the Islamic nations to designate the Israeli military as a terrorist organization. On the other hand, pro-Palestinian protests can be seen across Europe, America, even in Australia. But at home, trade unions are asking the central Indian government to scrap deal to send Indian workers to Israel. This after Israel kicked out all Palestinians from Israel. Now, leaders at the Arab League and the OIC Joint Summit hosted by Saudi Arabia have called for an end to the war in Gaza and rejected justifying Israel's actions against Palestinians as self-defense. The summit has condemned, quote-unquote, Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip and termed the actions of the Israeli army as war crimes, barbaric, and an inhumane massacre. Now, at the beginning of the summit, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said that the kingdom holds the Israeli authorities responsible for the crimes committed against the Palestinians.
We are witnessing a humanitarian catastrophe that demonstrates the failure of the Security Council and the international community to put an end to the flagrant Israeli violations of international laws and norms and international humanitarian law. It confirms the double standards and selectively in its application. What future do I speak of when Gaza is being destroyed? Every hour, tens of people die. What future do they want us to talk about? The only future that we can talk about, and this is the unifying position of the Arab and Islamic countries, is an immediate ceasefire.
Well, that's the Saudi Arabian stance. Meanwhile, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, who is on his first trip to Saudi Arabia since the two countries mended ties back in March, called upon the Islamic countries to designate the Israeli military, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, as a terrorist organization.
Undoubtedly, the US government is the commander and the main accomplice of the crime. Both the war machines of the Zionist regime and its fuel belong to the Americans. Cutting any sort of political or economic relations with the Zionist regime by the Islamic countries. In this regard, trade boycott against the Zionist regime, especially in the energy field, should be prioritized. Islamic governments should designate the army of the occupying and aggressor regime as a terrorist organization.
Well, now, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan renewed his call for an immediate ceasefire and said that Israel was taking revenge on Gazan babies, children and women.
We are faced with a barbarism unprecedented in history, where hospitals, places of worship, schools and refugee camps, ambulances are bombed and civilians are massacred. According to the UN, in Gaza and Ramallah, 12,000 Palestinians have been killed and 73% of them were women and children.
And now it's important to note that the final declaration of the summit also called upon the United Nations Security Council to adopt a decisive and binding resolution to halt Israel's aggression. The declaration also called for an end to weapons sales to Israel and dismissed any kind of future political resolution to the conflict that would keep Gaza separate from the West Bank area. The summit, however, also brought out differences which exist amongst the Arabic countries. 4 Arabic countries rejected a proposal which called for prohibiting the use of American and other military bases located in Arab countries to supply Israel with weapons and ammunition and other material. The names of these 4 countries that rejected the proposal have not been disclosed. At the same time, several nations in the grouping also rejected responding to Israel's actions by disrupting oil supplies and by severing economic and diplomatic ties with Israel. Israel has till now rejected all calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that the Israeli forces will continue their operations in Gaza with full force. Meanwhile, the Israeli military has said that it will help in evacuating babies who are trapped in Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. The announcement was made by Israeli military spokesperson Daniel Hagari.
We're speaking directly and regularly with the hospital staff. The staff of the Shifa hospital has requested that tomorrow we will help the babies in the pediatric department to get to a safer hospital. We will provide the assistance needed. There is no siege, I repeat, there is no siege on the Shifa hospital. The east side of the hospital is open on El Wade Street for the safe pass of Gazans who wish to leave the hospital.
There is no siege on Al-Shifa, this coming from the IDF itself. Now, this announcement from Israel comes after several international humanitarian organizations called upon the Israeli government to cease the unrelenting assault on Gaza's health system. Our next report tells you more.
Thousands of people seeking safety in southern Gaza fled the enclave's main hospital on Saturday as fighting continued in the area for the second day. This man says he lost his son in gunfire and that he had to keep moving, leaving his body at the site.
It's more of a war zone here. It's continuous bombardment for more than 24 hours.
Speaking to Reuters by phone, Palestinian senior plastic surgeon Dr. Ahmed Al-Mokhalalati said most of the hospital staff and people sheltering at Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, had left, but 500 patients were still there. A Palestinian health ministry spokesman said Israeli shelling had killed a patient in intensive care, and fighting was limiting people's ability to move. Palestinian officials said 2 babies had died and dozens more were at risk after fuel ran out on Saturday. At a news conference, Chief Israeli military spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said the military will help evacuate babies trapped there. In this video released by the Israeli army, defense official Colonel Moshe Tetro says there are clashes between Israel Defense Forces troops and Hamas operatives around the hospital, but the Israeli military denied endangering it. Israel said earlier that doctors, patients, and thousands of evacuees who have taken refuge at the hospitals in northern Gaza must leave so it can tackle Hamas gunmen who it says have placed command centers under and around them. Hamas denies using hospitals in this way. Meanwhile, Hamas said it had completely or partially destroyed more than 160 Israeli military targets in Gaza, including more than 25 vehicles in the past 48 hours. But an Israeli military spokesperson said Hamas had lost control of northern Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu repeated in a press conference on Saturday his aim that Israel take security control over Gaza for an indefinite period, saying we won't stop until the mission is completed. Dr. Rick Brennan, the regional emergency director of the World Health Organization, says the situation is desperate.
50% of those hospitals are non-functioning right now. Those that are functioning are working well below their capacity because of a lack of fuel, a lack of medicines, a lack of water and necessary medical supplies. Doctors, nurses are completely exhausted and overwhelmed, and a number of the hospitals are under attack.
As the humanitarian situation worsened, Gaza's border authority announced that the Rafah land crossing into Egypt would reopen on Sunday for foreign passport holders after being closed on Friday.
Calls for immediate ceasefire, even as a child is killed on average every 10 minutes in the Gaza Strip. World Health Organization Director General Jeff Tedros also told the same to the United Nations Security Council. He said that half of Gaza's 36 hospitals and 2/3 of its primary healthcare centers were not functioning, and those that were operating were way beyond their capacities, describing the healthcare system as being on its knees.
Thousands of displaced people sheltering at hospitals, families crammed into overcrowded schools, desperate for food and water. More than 10,800 people have now been killed in Gaza, almost 70% of them women and children. On average, a child is killed every 10 minutes in Gaza. 1.5 million people have been displaced and are looking for shelter anywhere they can find it. But nowhere and no one is safe.
Meanwhile, Israeli forces fought Hamas terrorists and inched their way closer to the two big hospitals in northern Gaza as the plight of civilians in the besieged Palestinian territory worsens. Many continue to flee the embattled north to the south. According to the IDF, that number is more than 1 lakh people within a span of 48 hours.
Smoke rises behind Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. In the courtyard and corridors are thousands of displaced people. At the gates, body bags. Israeli forces fought Hamas militants among ruined buildings in the north of the Gaza Strip on Thursday, inching their way closer to Al-Shifa and another main hospital in Gaza City. In the emergency room, this man says he and others tried to head south, but when they reached the road, a tank fired at them. Others fled along a frontline route. The White House said on Thursday Israel has agreed to pause operations in northern Gaza for 4 hours a day from Thursday, the first sign of respite in Gaza's war, allowing people to flee along 2 humanitarian corridors. Some of those escaping on Thursday said they feared another Nakba, the catastrophe of their mass dispossession after Israel was founded in 1948.
They are driving people to schools and scaring them so they would leave. What we see today is a plan for a second exodus.
What do things look like behind us? Death and destruction. Death and destruction.
US President Joe Biden says he's seeking a longer halt of 3 days to help secure the release of hostages held by Hamas.
We're hopeful. Things are moving along.
Israel unleashed its assault on Gaza in response to a cross-border raid by Hamas gunmen, who killed 1,400 people, mostly civilians, as well as kidnapping about 240. But the plight of Palestinians trapped in the besieged enclave has stoked global calls for a ceasefire, which is rejected by Israel and its main ally, the United States. Palestinian officials said more than 10,800 Gaza residents had been killed as of Thursday, about 40% of them children. At a humanitarian conference in Paris on Thursday, officials from about 80 countries and organisations were trying to coordinate a response. Jan Egeland heads the Norwegian Refugee Council.
We cannot wait a minute more for a humanitarian ceasefire across Gaza for all of the civilian population there. And we cannot wait a minute more for a lifting of the siege, which is collective punishment of 1 million children.
And even as people are fleeing various medical facilities, let's not even talk about the north to the south, there is a heartfelt story here. Because with no circus or fair inside the Al-Shifa hospital, Alam Miqdad, who works as a clown across the Gaza Strip, gathered displaced children outside the Al-Shifa hospital and put on a clown show. But after the deadly airstrike on the hospital, Miqdad joined thousands of other Palestinians fleeing Gaza's north as they sought safety in the south. Miqdad had to walk more than 6 kilometers from the Al-Shifa hospital towards Rafah with his pregnant wife, hoping his baby will be delivered safely. Now take a look at what's happening on the other side of the divide. We've shown you stories of what's happening inside the Gaza Strip. But in Israel, around 50 protesters demonstrated in Tel Aviv on Saturday evening, calling for a ceasefire as Israeli forces' assault on the Gaza Strip rages on. They said they were protesting the indiscriminate killing of civilians that have been seen in the past weeks by Hamas, by the IDF, the Israeli military alike. There were open calls for a ceasefire and the release of hostages as well. Now placards read, "Ceasefire now," and "No winners in any war."
We are here to protest against the indiscriminate killing of civilians that we are seeing in the past weeks by Hamas and by the F in the Gaza Strip. We are calling for a ceasefire now and release of the hostages and going towards a solution to this never-ending bloodshed and continued killing.
For Palestinians, we want everyone that live inside the border and outside of it, whether it's within Israel, the Gaza Strip, or the West Bank, to live in peace and equality.
Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian protests have also been taking shape across the world, especially in the West. Take a look at this. Britons gathered to demand ceasefire in Gaza on Armistice Day.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We will never let you die.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
Protesters gathered at a pro-Palestinian march in London on Saturday to demand a ceasefire from Israel's bombardment of the Gaza Strip. Government ministers had called for Saturday's march to be cancelled because it falls on Armistice Day, which marks the end of World War I and commemorates those killed in military action. British Interior Minister Suella Braverman said that protesters were hate marchers in a remark that attracted widespread criticism. But protesters said her words had the opposite effect. Take a look at this. This is what one 26-year-old protester had said. They said Armistice Day is supposed to be about the end of the war. And this is exactly what people are here for. We want to see an end to the war in Gaza, and this is what we're supporting.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire! What do we want? Ceasefire!
Meanwhile, hundreds of protesters rallied outside the district office of Representative Yvette Clark in Flatbush, New York, on Thursday, demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Protesters wrote the names of some of the over 4,000 Palestinian children killed amid this conflict. The White House said that Israel agreed to pause military operations in parts of North Gaza for 4 hours a day, but there was no sign of a let-up in the fighting that has killed thousands and laid waste to the seaside enclave. Now earlier, a small group of protesters, they scaled the Scottish Parliament building in Edinburgh, waving Palestinian flags. A banner that was unfurled by the group at the building's entrance read, "Stop arming Israel." Britain has supported Israel's right to defend itself after an October 7th attack by terrorist group Hamas that Israel said has killed more than 1,200 people, mostly civilians. Meanwhile, a deadly missile race is taking place in West Asia. Countries no longer have monopoly on missiles, with armed groups and terror outfits having access to them. This increases the possibility of war and destruction in the region, as these groups aren't held back by any moral or diplomatic boundaries. Take a look at this. States no longer have monopoly over missiles, with Iran allegedly supplying missiles to Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the Houthis from Yemen fired a ballistic missile on Israel on the 31st of October, which was intercepted by Israel's Arrow defense system. It was the first space interception, as the missile traveled 1,600 kilometers aimed at Israel. Now, armed groups now pose a conventional military threat. Now, West Asia is a hotbed of missiles. Historically, West Asia has been a hotbed of missiles in the world, with reports saying that 90% of 5,000 missiles used between 1945 to the year 2017 have been used in West Asia. 11 countries in West Asia possess ballistic missiles. Soviet Scud missile was fired at Israel in 1973, and the Iran-Iraq war saw many Scud missile fires. Iran is one of the 57 countries that has smart precision guided bombs. But how can Israel combat these particular threats? Now, Israel faces grave threat from armed groups who can use missiles against Israel from various locations. The armed groups have changed the strategic calculus in West Asia. Israel will need to deal with large proportion of incoming missiles. Israel will have to step up its defense systems. It already has the David Sling, the Iron Dome, and the Arrow 3. Israel will need to ramp up electronic warfare. Israel will also have to look into ways of finding cheaper ways of interception. Israel also has to increase its reliance on allies in the region. It also joined the Middle East Air Defense Alliance in the year 2022 as a step in this very direction. But until 10 days ago, Tom Hand, who believed his daughter had been killed in attacks by Hamas gunmen on the 7th of October attack, based on unofficial information that he had received, of course, on the 31st of October, things looked in a stark contrast. The Israeli army confirmed that his daughter had not been identified as one of the people killed in Kibbutz Be'eri, and they believed she was alive and in Gaza. Take a look at this next report, where mourning has turned into hope, but relief has turned into anxiety.
Unofficial reports came in that she was found dead in the kibbutz. Like I say, it was unofficial. I was relieved. I was relieved that she was dead and it was all over. It would have been pretty quick. Now I know she's in Gaza and she's alive. She's going to be 9 in the tunnels, which will be a lovely birthday party for her. She won't even know it's her birthday. She'll have no idea of night or day or time. But yeah, there'll be no birthday party, no birthday cake, no friends around. But now we hope, now we pray, because we know she's alive. You have to completely switch your head around 180 degrees and think, okay, we're going to get her back. We're going to get her back. We're going to get them all back. No matter when we get her back, we'll have the biggest birthday party the world has ever seen.
Well, we'll continue to bring you all the latest developments from the conflict-ridden region in West Asia, Israel-Hamas's war, day 37. Meanwhile, shifting our focus to some top international and global updates as well. Japan's self-defense forces, the SDF, held mock tsunami evacuations on Yonaguni Island near Taiwan in drills that a local official said could also help residents respond to any future Chinese attack on their neighbor. A Japan Force statement said that the exercise was about natural disaster preparedness but it also gives people something to think about that may come in useful later. For example, a Taiwan emergency. The military conducted these preparedness drills, disaster relief drills, to prepare the people of this westernmost island of tsunami risks, and it may come in handy if something happens in the Taiwanese region. And shifting our focus here, migrants continued to cross into the United States from Mexico on Saturday through the open edge of the border wall in Jacumba Hot Springs, California. For months now, a makeshift camp has seen migrants pass by in the eastern San Diego desert, where they wait to be processed by Border Patrol officials. Overwhelmed by record number of asylum seekers from around the world, the United States' border officials have released thousands of migrants on the streets in San Diego area in October, including about 1,400 in the beach town of Oceanside. Now, the United States' border officers picked up more than 204,000 migrants in the San Diego sector in the 11 months through August, which is up by 27% from the same period of the previous year. So migrants continue to cross into the United States via Mexico. Interesting figure over here is that the United States' border officers and officials have picked up more than 204,000 migrants in the San Diego sector just in the 11 months up till August, which is a figure that is up by 27% from the same period of the previous year. Shifting our focus to Chile, where thousands of members and supporters of the Chile's LGBTQ community joined the Equality March in Santiago to confront what they brand political gridlock on LGBTQ and anti-discrimination issues. And next up, taking a look at some national and domestic developments as well. It is, of course, the auspicious occasion of Diwali, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he yet again celebrated Diwali with the security forces, this time stationed in Himachal Pradesh's Lepcha. Now, this is the 10th consecutive year that the Prime Minister is celebrating the festival with the Jawans on the border fronts. Take a look at that. Visuals of the Prime Minister greeting and celebrating Diwali with the brave hearts. Now, interacting with the soldiers, Prime Minister Modi said that wherever the Indian Army personnel are stationed, that place is like a temple for me. He said that the Army had a big role in creating an atmosphere of peace in the country and also in ensuring that India was safe. Prime Minister Modi also credited the brave hearts of the Army for presenting India as a strong military power which was committed to the mission of international peace.
मैं भी हर बार दिवाली पर सेना के, अपने सुरक्षा बलों के जवानों के बीच इसी एक भावना को लेकर के चला जाता हूं। कहां भी गया है, अवध तहां जहां राम निवास हो, यानी जहां राम है वहीं अयोध्या है। मेरे लिए जहां मेरी भारतीय सेना है, जहां मेरे देश के सुरक्षा बल के जवान तैनात हैं, वो स्थान किसी भी मंदिर से कम नहीं है। जहां आप हैं वहीं मेरा त्योहार है। और ये काम शायद 30-35 साल से भी ज्यादा समय हो गया होगा। मैंने कोई दिवाली ऐसी नहीं है जो आप सबके बीच जाकर के न मनाई हो। 30-35 साल हो गए। जब पीएम नहीं था, सीएम नहीं था, तब भी एक गर्व से भरे भारत के संतान के नाते मैं दिवाली पर किसी न किसी बॉर्डर पर जरूर जाता था। आप लोगों के साथ मिठाइयों का दौर तब भी चलता था और मैस का खाना भी खाता था, और इस जगह का नाम भी तो शुगर पॉइंट है। आपके साथ थोड़ी सी मिठाई खाकर मेरी दीपावली भी और मधुर हो गई है। मेरे परिवारजनों, इस धरती ने इतिहास के पन्नों में पराक्रम की स्याही से अपनी ख्याति खुद लिखी है। आपने यहां की वीरता की परिपाटी को अटल, अमर, अक्षुण्ण बनाया है। आपने साबित किया है आसन्न मृत्यु के सीने पर, आसन्न मृत्यु के सीने पर जो सिंहनाद करते हैं, मर जाता है काल स्वयं, पर वे वीर नहीं मरते हैं।
It was Siachen back in 2014. This time it's Himachal Pradesh's Lepcha. Last year it was Kargil. The Prime Minister does make it a point to celebrate Diwali with the Jawans on the border fronts. First thing on Diwali. But meanwhile, even as we're talking about the security forces, as per reports, the Indian and Chinese military ground commanders along the line of actual control have been holding interactions to rule out any untoward incident as the harsh months of winter are approaching. The talks come as both the forces brace for what will be the fourth winter since the start of a military standoff along the LAC, which began in the summer of 2020. Now, as per reports, several agenda-based interactions have been taking place at multiple points along the line of actual control for the past 10 days. The talks are being headed by local commanders at the level of brigade, and it has the objective to sort out minor issues that may have cropped up and to prevent any incident during the coming winter months. Now, these meetings are among the various confidence-building measures which were discussed during the previous Corps Commander level talks between India and China. More such kind of meetings are likely to take place over the next few weeks as well. Meanwhile, as per reports, the Indian Army has already started moving into its winter posture. Enhancement of infrastructure is also being carried out at the border areas. This as the Army continues to maintain adequate reserves in the sensitive areas along the line of actual control in order to be prepared to deal with any contingency that may happen. Shifting our focus here, close to about 40 workers are feared to be trapped after an under-construction tunnel collapsed in Uttarakhand. The unfortunate incident happened in the Uttarakhand district. Inside the tunnel, which is meant to connect Silkyara to Dandalgaon, the tunnel is being built under the Char Dham road project. The incident occurred around 4 a.m. in the morning when a 150-meter long portion of the 4.5-kilometer long tunnel completely collapsed. Relief and rescue operations are being conducted by the State Disaster Relief Force and the local state police as well. As per authorities, a narrow opening has been made to insert an oxygen pipe in the tunnel to provide immediate relief to the people that are stuck inside. Relief team said that nearly 200 meters of the slab will have to be cleared to open the tunnel and pull out those that are stuck inside. Till now, no casualty has been reported, but rescue operations are in full swing.
मेरी लगातार जब से घटना की जानकारी मिली है तब से मैं लगातार सभी के संपर्क में हूं। वहां के जिले के प्रशासन के लोगों से, कमिश्नरी के लोग, हमारे आपदा प्रबंधन के लोग, सारे लोग आपदा के काम में लगे हैं, रेस्क्यू के काम में लगे हैं, बचाव के काम में लगे हैं। और एनडीआरएफ, एसडीआरएफ सभी मौके पर पहुंच गए हैं और भगवान से प्रार्थना करते हैं हम कि जल्दी सभी सकुशल जो है वापस आएं।
देखिए, जो लेटेस्ट अपडेट ये है कि अभी यहाँ पे पुलिस फोर्स और एनडीआरएफ, एसडीआरएफ पहुंच चुके हैं मौके पर। जो अभी मेरी बात हुई है यहाँ पे जो जिम्मेदार अधिकारी हैं NHIDCL के, तो उनके द्वारा ये बताया गया है कि टोटल 36 जो है उनके रिकॉर्ड के हिसाब से जो है अंदर अभी ट्रैप्ड हैं। और ये सूचना जो है तड़के जल्दी की बताई जा रही है 6-7 बजे के लगभग की। और ये जो आप देख रहे हैं ये स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट है टनल का, इससे लगभग 200 मीटर आगे की घटना है जिसमें 50 मीटर का जो प्रोजेक्शन है टनल का ऊपर से वो धंस गया है। तो अभी जो है हम जो भी इक्विपमेंट्स है, मशीनरी है, वो सब यहाँ पे रोप इन कर लिया गया है और जो रेस्क्यू है वो युद्ध स्तर पे चल रहा है और इसको जल्दी खत्म कर लिया जाएगा और सबको सेफली निकाल लिया जाएगा। जो एक ऑक्सीजन पाइप जो है अंदर पहुँचा दिया गया है और ऑलरेडी ऑक्सीजन अंदर है, तो मोस्ट प्रोबेबली जो है वो सेफ होंगे। अभी कोई जनहानि या कैजुअलिटी कोई सूचना नहीं है।
Well, taking a look at some political developments in the state of Uttarakhand as well. The Pushkar Singh Dhami-led government in the state is all set to hold a special session of the state assembly after Diwali. As per sources, the special session will be called to pass the Uniform Civil Code bill, hence paving way for its implementation in the state. Once the bill is passed and implemented, Uttarakhand will become the first state to adopt a Uniform Civil Code post-independence. A 5-judge panel headed by retired Supreme Court Judge Justice Ranjana Desai has completed the draft report for UCC implementation in the state. The report is now expected to be handed over to the state government in the next few days, and Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami said that once the report is handed over, the process to implement UCC in the state will begin. The Congress-led opposition has criticized the proposed move to hold a special session. Congress has demanded to see the draft report first and also asked for time in order to make suggestions. And take a look at this. In a spectacular celebration of Diwali, the city of Ayodhya has illuminated, quite literally, the Guinness World Records by lighting over 22 lakh diyas during this year's Deepotsav 2023. Breaking its record from last year, the temple town's luminous feat that surpassed the previous record of over 15 lakh diyas set just last Diwali. Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath, along with the state governor and diplomats from around 54 countries, attended the grand celebration. Also, Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath himself received a certificate from Guinness World Records, making this Diwali truly special for the entire country. And like we make it a point here on News9 Live, climate change is something that needs to be spoken about every day. Coming up next, our full-blown segment on global climate stories. Well, first up to Iceland, where Icelandic authorities have completed the evacuation of 3,000 residents of a town in the southwestern part of the country over concerns of a volcanic eruption after a series of earthquakes and evidence of magma spreading underground. Icelandic authorities said on Saturday that they were preparing for a volcanic eruption in the southwest of the island in the coming days. The Icelandic Met Office said that there was a considerable risk of an eruption on the Reykjanes Peninsula because the size of the underground magma intrusion and the rate at which it is moving was several times greater than what was previously measured in the same area. Iceland's Civil Protection Agency overnight ordered a complete evacuation of Grindavik, a nearby fishing town, although it emphasized this was not an emergency evacuation. Now the Reykjanes region has in recent years seen several eruptions in unpopulated areas, but the current outbreak is believed to pose an immediate risk to the town as per authorities. On Thursday, increased seismic activity prompted the closure of the Blue Lagoon Geothermal Spa, one of the country's main tourist attractions.
Hours, the magma is now on a very shallow depth, so we're expecting an eruption within a couple of hours. Shortest, but at least within a couple of days. The location of it is somewhere from the town of Grindavik to the northeast. We have a fissure that's about 15 kilometers long, and anywhere on that fissure we can see that an eruption could happen. Because the end of the dike, the fissure that we're looking at, it goes into the sea. So if it will start in the sea, we would have at least in the beginning explosive period in the eruption, but that's the most unlikely scenario, as the scientist says, but we are prepared for that also. At this time we have evacuated everyone that lives in the area, so there is no people in danger at the moment. So there are two things that we're looking at. This the town of Grindavik with everything in it. It's a town of 3,700 people. But very close to the town we have a critical infrastructure. We have a power plant and we have the freshwater reservoir, and the hot water is also coming from this area. So there's a lot of critical infrastructure very close by. It can be, because our main focus is the life and health of people, and now we think that we have done everything we can, because nobody should be there. So that's our first priority. But we are really concerned about all the houses and the infrastructure in there.
What we are seeing now really is an unprecedented event. We are really talking about velocities for this process and volumes or inflow rates that are much higher than what we have been seeing in the peninsula so far. Why this process is faster? That's because the more magma apparently is available. The surrounding has changed a lot. The crust has been fractured so much over the past 3 years, and that's in a way might be helping magmatic fluids in finding faster their path.
Well, from Iceland, let's move on to France, where hundreds of people have been evacuated from their houses in the Pas-de-Calais region in northern France on Saturday. Near Saint-Omer, rescuers helped families collect their belongings and move to dry and safe places after heavy rains on Friday caused the Our River to overflow. The area remained on high alert on Saturday as well, as local authorities warned that although rain had stopped, the risk of inundation was still high. Take a look at that. Now, northern French farmers expressed worries on Friday after persistent flooding in their particular regions this week led to the losses in their crops and livestock as well. It's strawberry season there, and a lot of farmers have lost out on a lot of their crop. Now, days of heavy rains in the northern French department of Pas-de-Calais have caused local rivers to overflow, flooded houses, prompting the evacuation of residents, as over 100 towns are currently on red alert. Some 200 schools in this region have been shut, and rescue workers have also had to evacuate cattle. Meanwhile, European Space Agency Chief Joseph Ashbacher warned that the melting of polar ice caps and glaciers is very critical and called political leaders worldwide to recognize the importance of climate change and how to tackle it.
The situation at the poles is very critical. We have, of course, we see with our satellites day and night how big the melting of the polar regions is, but also what is the impact on sea level rise. We have some of the most accurate satellite measurements to see how the sea level is rising due to melting of polar regions, glaciers and so on. Well, what I really expect and hope for, but this is more as a private citizen because it's for the politicians to really implement these actions, is to recognize the importance of climate change, what has to be done to really do everything that is necessary to decarbonize our economy and become carbon neutral by mid of this century. And there, again, you have all the support from the space agencies. The European Space Agency is spending a significant amount of its funding. About 1/4 of our budget is dedicated to Earth observation, which is mostly focusing on climate activities. And yes, we fully support these initiatives with the means we have at our disposal.
Moving on, the exposed cracked floors of parts of Lake Titicaca, South America's largest freshwater basin, nestled amid the Andes Mountains, are an alarming sight for the local farmers and scientists. Well, why? Here's a report to take a look.
This dry patch of land used to be part of Lake Titicaca. Now, record low water levels amid a long spell of drought are threatening the region's ecosystem. It's an alarming sight for local farmers like Manuel Flores.
I am 50 years old. Never before has Lake Titicaca dried up like it is now.
Nestled amid the Andes Mountains, Lake Titicaca is South America's largest body of fresh water and is also the highest navigable lake in the world. It's an important ecosystem for wildlife and a water source for millions of people in the region. But its water levels are now reaching record lows.
This affects us because there is no more food for our livestock and we cannot travel by boat. Now we have to walk and our crops no longer exist because it hasn't rained since last year. So the water has decreased.
The situation is worsened by El Niño weather phenomenon. That means less rain in the area, compounding a long dry spell and rare high temperatures. Experts say many of the factors contributing to the shrinking of Lake Titicaca could be linked to climate change. Xavier Lazaro is an aquatic system specialist with the French Research Institute for Development.
95% of the water loss from the lake is due to evaporation, which shows that this is totally or almost totally caused by climate change.
Farmers and experts say the drought is now approaching critical levels for the region's agriculture. If it does not rain by early December, there will be no planting of potatoes, one of the food staples for Bolivia's rural communities and cities. Lake Titicaca's decline comes with global temperatures hitting record highs, which has impacted rivers, lakes and glaciers from the United States to Asia.
Well, shifting our focus to East Africa, where the United Nations has warned that around 1.6 million people, that's 16 lakh people in Somalia, could be affected amid flooding across East Africa caused by heavy seasonal downpours.
The United Nations has described floods that have uprooted hundreds of thousands of people in Somalia and its neighbours as a once-in-a-century event. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said around 1.6 million people in Somalia could be affected by the heavy seasonal downpours, which follow a historic drought. The floods have already killed at least 29 people in Somalia and forced more than 300,000 from their homes. In Mogadishu on Thursday, Hussein Abtidoun, the regional director of hygiene and beauty restoration, was cleaning the streets with his team.
Yesterday, the rains damaged the engines of many cars. Many tuk-tuks were pulled out of the water. The workers are ready to help in the areas that were affected. We rescued many tuk-tuks carried away by the floods. Our rescue teams are on standby near the dams in the city to save people from the floodwaters.
Among places flooded in Somalia are camps for those already displaced by a jihadist insurgency or by the country's worst drought in 4 decades. Aid groups say people there are being forced to flee for a second time. UN Aid Chief Martin Griffiths said extreme weather linked to the ongoing El Niño weather phenomenon could further escalate humanitarian needs in already vulnerable communities. We know what the risks are, he said, and we need to get ahead of these looming crises.
Meanwhile, a report on climate change claims that 2023 is guaranteed to be the hottest year on record due to unprecedented temperature anomalies. The report was published by the Copernicus Climate Change Service. Deputy Director of the CCCS, Samantha Burgess, added that October 2023 has been identified as the warmest October globally. She emphasized the pressing need for urgent and immediate climate action leading up to COP28.
So October 2023 was the warmest October on record globally, with an average surface temperature of 15.3 degrees Celsius. What this means is this last month was 0.85 degrees Celsius above the recent average and 0.4 degrees Celsius above the previous warmest October. So the only time that we've ever had a bigger difference between the previous warmest month and the current one is last month in September. So October 2023 is almost as shocking as September 2023 was.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Top Stories. Lots more will continue right on the other side. This is Kabir Naqvi signing off. You have a safe Diwali. Keep watching News9 Live.
ChatGPT